Shadows clung to the empire of Antopolis, a labyrinth of tunnels whirring beneath a forgotten cookie. Here, amidst the stolen sweetness and the ceaseless hum of 1,000 tiny legs, Nostradamus toiled. Others hurried on paths of purpose. He lurked, drawn to whispers echoing from the world beyond. The granules of sugar he gathered weren't mere sustenance, but omens etched in crystalline code by unknowable forces. His nest, a grotesque shrine of singed maps and cryptic symbols, crackled with a disquieting energy. For Nostradamus wasn't simply an ant. He was a prophet of a terrible, unsettling truth. The universe pulsed with a rhythm alien and uncaring. That's from a short story I wrote a couple of years back called They Danced in the Long Eclipse. It's on my blog, doesgodexist.org, under Cosmic Tales, and it's about an ant named Nostradamus who reads the future in sugar granules while his colony watches with a mixture of pity and creeping unease. Now, here's something about Nostradamus you might not realize. He's deranged, obviously. He's an ant staring at sugar and seeing the end of the world. He's also you, 3 Thursdays ago, staring at a burn-down chart and feeling, not calculating, feeling that the release was going to slip. He's you reading doom in the tone of a 2-line Slack message from your VP. He's every engineering leader who ever looked at a perfectly green dashboard and thought, something's wrong, and I can't tell you what. We are all ants reading sugar. The only question is whether you do it badly, by accident, in the middle of the night, or on purpose, with a method, like a professional. Tonight, I'm going to teach you how to do it, on purpose. Welcome back to Transmissions from Elysium. Pour something. Light a candle if you've got one. Tonight, we're allowed. Because tonight, I'm going to teach you the occult art of how to read tarot cards. No, really, that's the episode. I'm going to teach you, a presumably rational, presumably employed leader of software engineers, to shuffle a deck of occult cards and divine answers from them. Along the way, we're going to talk about a fraudulent Egyptian scripture, a secret Victorian magical society, and no, not Victoria's Secret, a synesthete artist, history erased, Carl Jung, a royal sorcerer with an Aztec mirror, and the single most important reason none of this can be outsourced to an AI. And here's my promise. By the end, the card reading is going to be the most defensible, most evidence-backed thing on your calendar. The cards aren't the eerie part. The eerie part is the discovery waiting at the end of the spread, that there has always been something else in there with you. Something that never sleeps, it never blinks, it never speaks. It just knows things. And once you give it a voice, once you hear what it's been hiding, you don't get to unhear it. The oracle's in the meat. Let's go and find it. Let me start with a morning my body tried to warn me, and I didn't listen, and it cost me 50 kilometers. March 2011. I was living and working in Japan, and if you were there, you remember that the big one didn't come out of nowhere. The ground had been muttering for days. Micro-earthquakes, little shudders. The kind you stop consciously noticing after you've lived in Japan for a while because the building sways, the lamp swings, and everyone just keeps typing. In fact, most offices have little things hanging on the wall whose purpose is to show you that there's actually been an earthquake. And it's not a side effect of getting stuck out in the izakaya again. The one in our office was a little Snoopy plushie. Well, anyway, it was the morning of March 11th. I woke up with a start. Not an alarm, not a noise, just awake all at once. My heart was going like someone had grabbed me by the back of the brain and yanked. And that whole morning, I felt wrong. I was dead sick. Not sick like a cold, sick like my system was throwing errors with no stack trace. I had nausea, I had dread, I had that heavy feeling like your body had been filled with wet sand. And somewhere underneath that noise, a very quiet, very clear signal was yelling at me, "Stay home today." Did I stay home? Of course not. I'm a professional. I had a meeting to run and a presentation to give. The sick feeling didn't come with a citation. It didn't come with a JIRA ticket. It didn't present itself in a format my calendar could accept. So I overrode it. I went to work. And at 2:46 in the afternoon, the 4th largest earthquake in recorded history hit off the coast of Tohoku, Fukushima. I was at the top of an 8-story building in downtown Ginza when it arrived. If you've never been in a major quake, the picture in your head is probably just shaking, like turbulence, rattling. Well, not this time. A big quake, it moves the building. The whole structure was swaying, like actually swaying, like the top of a ship's mast. And the building was making sounds. Concrete is not supposed to have a voice, but it was groaning. The walls were cracking. I watched a seam open up and crawl across the plaster like something under there was waking up. The windows didn't break so much as let go, bursting glass everywhere, all at once. Ceiling tiles came down all around us like the building was shedding its own skin. At first, I was scrambling to yell at people to take cover. I handed out emergency hard hats, and by the time the earthquakes are usually over. Well, not this time. It kept growing, larger, louder, and more wobbling. Somehow, I ended up in the stairwell, 8 stories up, the floor buckling underneath me, holding onto the railing, and, I'll be honest with you about exactly what was in my head, because it wasn't anything brave or useful. It was one sentence on a loop. It was, "This is it. This is how I die." In a fucking stairwell. Every part of the animal that had whispered "stay home" that morning was now screaming at me in complete sentences and laughing at my ignorance. And all I could do was grip the steel and listen to it be right. And, people got hurt. Right there near me, a person was struck with falling debris, and their head split open, and there was blood. And I'm not going to linger on it beyond saying this. You can read the phrase "minor structural damage" in a report 100 times. And it will never again mean what it meant to you before. You've watched a building try to bite someone. Sure, the building didn't collapse. Most didn't. The structure was fine. The problem, everything inside didn't get the memo. Once the shaking stopped, I yelled for everyone to get out of there, help folks make their way to the stairwell, and once I was sure no one was left behind, we all made the careful journey down 16 flights of stairs. Everyone got out. Everyone from the office was fine. The building held, I was lucky, genuinely, and a great many people that day. Further north, well, not so much. And I don't want to be glib about any of it. But the day wasn't done with me, because when there's a big earthquake, the trains stop running. All of them. And I became one of the millions of people in the Tokyo area who walked home that night. In my case, it was about 50 kilometers, on foot, in Japanese business shoes. That stiff, stuffy, formal leather that was never consulted about anything past a commute. And they took their payment in skin. Blisters by the first hour, broken and bleeding by the 5th. And remember, I'd been sick since that morning, and the sickness never left. I walked that whole distance, shivering with a fever, and more than once I stopped at the edge of the road to vomit. I wiped my mouth and just kept going, because there was no other option on the menu. 50 kilometers, bleeding feet, running a fever, throwing up in the gutters of a shaking city. And even so, the walking itself wasn't the worst part, because the aftershocks kept coming. And every time the ground twitched, the city above us would let something go. Tiles, signage, a piece of facade. Shrugged off who knows how many stories up, arriving at street level like judgment. You'd hear one hit the pavement, and somewhere in the dark, and the whole crowd would flinch as a single organism and press away from the walls. 50 kilometers of walking down the middle of the street, out from under the eaves of the city that was still dropping pieces of itself. Past convenience stores stripped of the shelving, thinking with every single step that there were, and trust me, there were a lot of steps. My body told me this morning. It told me. And I asked for documentation, and when it couldn't produce any, I just ignored it. Now, was that precognition? Did I cyclically foresee the earthquake? No. Almost certainly what happened is boring, but it's much more interesting than magic. Days of microquakes, my consciousness had filtered them as ambient noise and were still being logged somewhere below deck. Some ancient subsystem, the one that's been keeping primates alive since before language was installed, had been counting tremors, and its threat model quietly flipped from normal to get out. And because that subsystem predates speech by a couple 100 million years, it couldn't file a report. All it could do was flood the chassis and with dread and hope that I'd take the hint. Well, I didn't take the hint, and the result was 50 kilometers. So that's the problem statement for tonight, and I want you to hold on to it for the whole episode. You're carrying an analysis engine that is older than language, that runs continuously, and is very good at pattern recognition. It just doesn't have a speech interface. It communicates exclusively in nausea, headaches, hunches, restlessness, and 3 a.m. wake-ups. It's a genius that can only knock on the pipes. There's a Harlan Ellison story from 1967, one of the greatest horror titles ever printed. It's called I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream, a godlike computer. Think Sam Altman and Elon Musk love child AI turned AGI that keeps the last 5 humans alive to torment them. And at the end, the narrator is remade into something soft and shapeless, fully aware, fully awake, with no mouth. The horror isn't the pain. The horror is containment, an intelligence sealed away inside a body that gives it no way out. That title's been rattling around in my skull all week as I was trying to put this episode together, because you, my friends, are living the inverted version of that story right now as we speak. Somewhere below your language, there is an intelligence that has watched everything you have ever watched. It has been in every meeting, every incident review, every hallway conversation. It counted the tremors in Tokyo while I slept. It knows things about your project, your team, your marriage that you haven't admitted to yourself. And it has no mouth. It has never had a mouth. It's been sealed in there your whole life, fully aware, pressed against the inside of you. And every gut feeling you've ever had, every wave of nausea before a meeting, every 3 a.m. wake up, every inexplicable dread on an ordinary Tuesday, that's it. That's the sound it makes, the scream, arriving through the only channels it has, your stomach, your palms, your sleep. It has no mouth and it must scream. So tonight, let's give it a mouth. But before we get to the cards, and trust me, we're going to get there, I promise. The occult content in this episode is really the load-bearing piece. I want to convince you that the knocking in the pipes is real. Because trust your gut, that's the kind of thing that gets embroidered on pillows, it puts up on motivational posters, and you should probably not restructure your engineering organization based on these pithy sayings. And since this is my occult episode, we're going to do this properly. So I want you to dim the lights. I want you to light a candle, the one I told you about at the top of the show. If you don't have a candle, use your phone flashlight. The spirits, they've adopted to the times. Same as the rest of us. Go ahead, place your hands on the table, because right now, together, we're holding a seance. We're reaching across the veil, back through 4 decades of smoke, into a burning house in the American Midwest, to summon the spirit of a firefighter. Now, full disclosure, because this show keeps receipts, even mid-ritual, nobody dies in the story. The man we're summoning survived. He's still alive if you want to go talk to him. That's rather the point of him. And he went on to give interviews about it. He's quite possibly alive at this moment in a comfortable pants, watching television, completely unaware that this podcast is currently attempting to summon him. We summon him anyway. Seance rules are much looser than people think. That's most of the business model. So, the candle's flickering. The room's getting cold. Something's crossing over. And through the veil, smelling faintly of smoke and municipal pension, comes the fire lieutenant. As with any spirit, a little biography helps the summoning. In mid-1980s, a research psychologist named Gary Klein got funding from the Army to study how experienced commanders make decisions under time pressure. The theory of the time said decision-making meant generating options and comparing them, pros and cons, weighted matrices, the whole responsible adult toolkit. Klein's team interviewed 26 fireground commanders, average of 23 years experience each, and dug into 156 real decision points from the fires. You know how many of those decision points showed any evidence of comparing options? Less than 12%. The commanders weren't choosing. They'd look at a fire, and a course of action would simply arrive, already assembled, already good enough to run. Klein's conclusion, which became the recognition prime decision model, experts don't decide, experts recognize. And then there's a story, the one Klein tells they think about constantly. A lieutenant takes his crew into a house fire. It looks like a standard kitchen fire. They hit it with water and the fire doesn't behave. It doesn't die back the way the kitchen fire should. And the lieutenant hears himself, his words, "Let's get the fuck out of here." No reason attached. He just says it, and they go. Seconds later, the floor they'd been standing on collapses into a basement they weren't aware of, because the fire was never in the kitchen. The heart of it was in the basement, directly underneath their boots, quietly eating the floor joists. What gives me chills isn't the collapse, it's the debrief. At the time, the lieutenant could not tell you why he gave that order. He genuinely thought, and this is the real thing he said, that he might be special. He's got ESP and he's psychic. A sixth sense. It took a 2-hour debrief with Klein to reconstruct what his 20 years of pattern library had actually clocked in those few seconds. The fire was too hot for a kitchen fire, and it was too quiet. That much heat should have been roaring, and it shrugged off water. 3 cues. Every one of them processed below the threshold of language, summed silently into a single output. Get the fuck out of there. His body knew the fire was lying to him before his mouth caught up. Okay, so you can let the fire lieutenant go now. Thank him as he goes. He's given his testimony, and the daytime television won't watch itself. Let's leave the candle burning. We're going to need it again before the night's out. And notice one last thing about our spirit, because it matters. The man himself, the one who lived it, walked away believing it was ESP, a sixth sense. Even the ghost thinks he's in a ghost story. He isn't. That's not mysticism. That's compressed experience with no verbal interface, which, hold on to your deck, is exactly what a certain 78 card divination instrument is going to give us an interface for, but not yet. First, the fine print. So this is where the Crystal Shop version of this episode and I file for divorce. Your gut is not always a genius. Sometimes your gut is a confident drunk with a podcast, like me. The best thing ever written on this is a 2009 paper with my favorite backstory in all of psychology. Daniel Kahneman, the biases guy, Nobel laureate, professionally suspicious of intuition, And Gary Klein, the guy who I told you about was researching the firefighters, professionally impressed by intuition, had been on opposite sides of this argument for decades. So they did something almost nobody in academia has a stomach for. They wrote a paper together, two opposite folks writing together. It took them almost 6 years. It's called Failure to Disagree, and Kahneman later called it his most satisfying collaboration. What they agreed on is a two-part test, and it deserves lamination because it is the difference between using tonight's technique wisely and use it to justify your nonsense. Your intuition is trustworthy only when two conditions both hold. Condition number 1, the environment has to be learnable. There have to be real, stable patterns connecting what you see to what happens next. Fires behave like fires. Chess positions always behave like chess positions. Code bases, and I'm going to die on this hill, rot in recognizable ways. Condition number 2, you need years of practice with fast, honest feedback. You have to have made the call, seen the outcome, and felt the difference over and over for the pattern library to actually get written. Firefighting passes both. 23 years of fires, and the fire always tells you promptly whether you were right. Now, picking stocks, it fails on condition 1. The environment is mostly noise. There's nothing stable to learn. Predicting which startups gets acquired, it's the same. And this one should sting a little. Hiring by vibes fails condition number 2. You interview someone, feel great about them, and then what? You never see the people you rejected. Feedback arrives years late, polluted by 100 other factors. There's an entire IO psychology literature on this, and it's brutal. A researcher named Scott Highhouse wrote a famous paper on managers' stubborn reliance on their own read of candidates when the numbers say the unstructured just chat vibe interview is one of the weakest predictors we have. The big 2022 reanalysis put at roughly half the validity of boring structured interviews. There's even a study, and this one's my favorite, where researchers had people conduct interviews in which candidates' answers were literally random, generating meaninglessness, and the interviews still came away confident that the conversation had helped them judge the person. The gut for them produced a strong, warm, confident signal from static. Then comes the truly nasty bit, the one Kahneman and Klein both signed their names to. Valid intuition and hallucinated intuition feel identical from the inside. Confidence is not a certificate. Lieutenant's gut and the interviewer's gut use the same channel, the same dread, the same conviction. One was reading 23 Years of Fire, the other was reading tea leaves, and not in a good way because I'm going to teach you the latter. One more piece of science. In the 1990s, a neuroscientist named Antonio Damasio ran what's called the Iowa gambling task. 4 decks of cards. This is a psych experiment, yes, but savor the fact that it is literally decks of cards, what we're talking about here. 2 of them rigged to bleed you dry with flashy wins and brutal losses. 2 of them quietly profitable. Players sample the decks and figure out over time which are bad. But the researchers also wired everyone's palms for skin conductance, and healthy players started throwing a measurable stress spike in their palms when their hand reached towards the bad deck, well before they could say out loud that those decks were bad. On average, the sweat showed up something like 10 draws before the sentence did. The body finished the analysis first, and its only output channel was the palm. Now, honestly, here, because the show has one of these honesty clauses, the somatic marker hypothesis is contested. Later researchers poked real holes, asked better questions, and found people knew more consciously than the original study measured. Argued the sweat might track uncertainty rather than badness. Fine. The defensible version survives all of it, and the defensible version is all I need today. Your body participates in an evaluation, and it participates on a different clock than your language is. Sometimes it's ahead. It was ahead in the case of the attendant. It was ahead of mine in the morning of March 11th. So that's the machine. It's it's powerful, but it's mute. And the only trustworthy inside a learnable domain you've actually put your reps into, which, for most of you listening, includes software systems, team dynamics, and the specific smell of a project that is lying to you. That's your fireground. The question is how you get the mute genius to talk. And the answer, I am delighted to report, is occult paraphernalia. So, tarot. Ancient Egyptian wisdom, encoded by temple priests into sacred cards, smuggled through the ages, whispering the secrets of the... No. Let's just stop there. None of that is true. The actual history is actually so much better, because the actual history is a story of the most successful content marketing fraud in Western civilization. And remember this twist. We'll be collecting on it. The fraud is going to end up proving my point about why the cards work. So, real history. The 1440s, Northern Italy. Somebody, probably Milan or Freda, takes an ordinary deck of playing cards and adds a 5th suit. 21 picture cards, plus a wild card they call the Fool. They call the picture card Trofoni. It triumphs, which is where the English word trump comes from. Take that from what you will. And what were these cards for? Fortune telling? Speaking to the dead? No, something much better. Gambling. It was a card game. A trick-taking game, structurally closer to bridge than anything spooky. The gorgeous hand-painting decks that survive, the Visconti Sforza cards, gold leaf commissioned by the Ducal family of Milan around 1450, those are luxury game sets. Renaissance nobles played card games with them for money for 350 years. And in all that time, there is no record, none, of anyone using tarot to tell fortunes. The best historian of this, by the way, Michael Dumet, an Oxford philosopher, one of the great fringe scholars of the 20th century, who spent decades of his spare time in the archives demolishing every occult claim about the cards. He's my kind of guy. So, let's fast forward, 1781 in Paris. Enter Antoine Court de Giblin, a French Protestant pastor, a Freemason, and author of a 9-volume speculative encyclopedia about a lost golden age civilization. So, completely reliable narrator. The story goes that he walks in on some ladies playing a card game, glances at the deck, and within 15 minutes, by his own account, he announces that he has recognized these cards as the surviving fragments of the Book of Thoth, the sacred text of the ancient Egypt, smuggled out by priests disguised as a game. The evidence he presented? 0. And I want to be precise about how much 0. This is decades before the Rosetta Stone was deciphered. In 1781, no living human could read a single word of ancient Egyptian. Court de Giblin could not check his claim, and neither could anyone else, which is the most comfortable possible position for a man with a theory. He put it in a volume of 8 in his encyclopedia anyway, and it worked completely. A gambling deck became ancient scripture because one guy said so confidently in print. Within 2 years, Parisian print seller named Jean-Petit Eliot, who reversed his own name to Atelier, because, branding, published the first ever manual of tarot divination. Then, the first purpose-built fortune-telling deck, and essentially invented the profession of paid tarot card readers. From a standing start, off the back of a claim a pastor made up in 15 minutes 2 years ago. I bring up Atelier partly for historical completeness and partly out of professional respect. One content creator to another. The man identified a market, and in that grand tradition, let me mention that if you want to go deeper on any of tonight's forbidden knowledge, my Patreon is $95.99 a month. And in exchange, you get absolutely nothing because I don't have a Patreon. Nothing at all. There's a tier above it called Inner Circle for $249.95 that gets you a different nothing. Look, Atelier established the business model in 1783. I'm just honoring the lineage. The link is not in the show notes. Okay, so where were we? Right. In the 1850s. And this is where the story starts being a simple con and becomes something much stranger, because next people to take up the deck weren't grifters, they were builders. Eliphas Levi, born Alphonse Louis Constant, a former Catholic seminarian who left before ordination and became one of the most influential occultists of his century. Notice coincidence. 22 trump cards, 22 letters of the Hebrew alphabet. The letters, tradition said, that creation itself was spoken in. 22 paths on the Kabbalistic tree of life, the map of how the divine descends into matter. And let me be clear about the coincidence. It's real. Nobody disputes the counting. The numeral accident is a seam Levi worked his fingers into. But what he actually did with it, because it's not what Court de Giblin did, the pastor invented a history. Levi took that and built a system. He took a deck with a fraudulent past and deliberately, methodically, wielded it to deeper symbolic architecture the West possessed, letter by letter, path by path. And if your instinct is to object that the correspondence isn't true, that nobody in the 1440s Milan intended any of it, you're asking the wrong question. Meaning is not something you find lying in the ground like it's a fossil. Meaning is conferred. We define it, we consecrate it, and once conferred, it's real in every way that matters to the nervous system doing the believing. Levi wasn't decoding an ancient machine, he was building one, on purpose. And every serious tarot system since then runs on this architecture. And then, in 1888 London, the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, a genuine secret magical society, they had initiation rituals, secret grades, cipher manuscripts of conveniently mysterious origin. They took Levi's frames and finished the construction. Every trump assigned a Hebrew letter, a planetary zodiacal attribution, a path on the tree, a color scale, a complete symbolic operating system. Every image cross-indexed against every register of meaning the Western esoteric tradition had ever accumulated. And before anyone smirks at that, I'm not going to, not at this part, understand what they were actually engineering, because it wasn't decoration. They were building a language for the wordless part of you. Deliberately, image by image, Symbols selected and layered because certain pictures reached past the deck clerk of consciousness and put their hand on something much older. Humans have known this for a very long time. In India and Tibet, practitioners have used mandalas, yantras, those concentric geometric diagrams for well over 1,000 years as instruments. The eye follows the pattern inward. The pattern bypasses the chattering surface entirely, and something underneath still goes and attends. Jung, and we'll get to Jung in a bit, watched patients spontaneously draw mandala forms he had never been shown from cultures he had never touched, and built his entire clinical method on finding buried in that there are prototype images sunk well deep within us, below biography, below language, and certain symbols strike them as a tuning fork finds its note. That is where the Golden Dawn was doing behind the locked doors and the funny handshakes. Wrapping it in ritual secrecy, yes. Couching it in mysteries, absolutely. But the project underneath was precise. A purpose-built vocabulary for giving language to the subconscious. Provenance was invented. The instrument is real. Hold both of those at once. The whole occult tradition lives in that overlap. As for build quality, look at the roster. W.B. Yeats. Yes, that Yeats. Nobel Prize Yeats. Arthur McKen. Algernon Blackerwood, half the founders of modern horror fiction, associated actresses and revolutionaries, the finest symbol-handling minds of the generation, all working in the same forge, naturally behind a secret society full of poets and magicians. And it tore itself apart in the schisms within 15 years. But before it died, it incubated the two people who built the modern tarot deck. One of them got his name on the box. The other is the reason why any of this works. In 1909, a Golden Dawn scholar named Arthur Edward White, the White deck, commissioned a new tarot deck for the London publisher William Ryder and Son. The artist he hired was a 31-year-old Golden Dawn initiate named Pamela Coleman Smith. Her friends called her Pixie. And I need you to understand what she actually did, because it's the hinge of this whole episode. Before Smith, in virtually every deck, the 56 minor cards, the 4 suits, were pip cards. The 5 of Cups was a picture of 5 cups, full stop, like 5 of Hearts in the deck of your junk drawer. To read those cards, you had to memorize a lookup table of meaning, like a lawyer, which is to say, no projection, no imagery, no intuition. Basically, it was a dictionary with extra steps. Smith painted all 78 cards in about 6 months, and for those 56 minor cards, she made a decision no major deck had made before. Every single card got a full scene. People, faces, weather, a story caught mid-frame. Her 5 of Cups isn't 5 of Cups, it's a figure in a black cloak, head bowed, grieving over 3 spilled cups, while 2 more stand upright behind them, unnoticed. You look at that card, and something in you moves before any book of meaning gets consulted. Is that person mourning, sulking, about to turn around and see what's left? Your answer, and this is the entire point, says nothing about the card, but everything about you. There's one detail about Pixie I've never been able to put down. Pamela Coleman Smith was a synesthete. Her senses cross-wired. She saw images when she heard music. Her first synesthetic experience reportedly hit her while listening to Bach, and she painted to music deliberately as a technique. Her whole career as a way of letting the unconscious out through her hands. Sit with that. The most widely used projective instrument in the Western world, the machine for turning inner states into pictures, was designed by a woman whose nervous system did that conversion automatically. Of course it was. Who else could have built it? And what did she get for it? A one-time flat fee of $56. No royalties, no credit. For most of the 20th century, the deck was called Rider White. Rider being the publisher and White being the man who wrote the little book that came in the box. The artist wasn't in the name. Her deck has sold over 100 million copies, which puts her artwork in more homes than nearly any painter you care to mention. And she died in 1951 in Bude, Cornwall, essentially penniless. Her belongings were auctioned off to cover her debts. The only claim she ever had on the work was a tiny serpentine monogram, a little squiggle she developed studying Japanese design that she quietly embedded in the corner of every single card. 100 million decks. Go look at any card from the deck everyone pictures when you say tarot. Bottom corner, she's there. These days, the deck is finally, slowly, being called the Rider White Smith. The Whitney put her cards in a museum show in 2022. Better late than never. And one more pattern while we're here, because it deserves saying out loud. The other dominant modern deck was Aleister Crowley's Thoth deck, a prismatic geometric, it's gorgeous, was printed by Lady Frida Harris, who's repainted some cards more than 20 times over 5 years to satisfy Crowley. Funded much of the project herself and spent decades as a footnote. Both of the great tarot decks of the modern age were drawn by women and named after men. The occult, it turns out, is exactly as bad at the attribution as a software industry. Someone in there's a Jira board where all of Pixie commits are credited to the guy who wrote the README. One more witness before I teach you the method, because he's the bridge between the candles and the science, and because people misquote him about this consistently. Carl Jung. And I'm not going to give you the Instagram version. I'm going to give you what he actually said in a seminar on the 1st of March in 1933, because we have the transcript, talking about intuitive methods. Jung said tarot is, quote, an attempt at representing constituents of the flow of the unconscious, suitable for, and this is a phrase to frame, the reading of the condition of the present moment. The reading of the condition of the present moment. Not next quarter, not your future husband, now. Diagnosis, not prophecy. The whole thesis of tonight episode stated plainly 93 years ago by a guy the crystal shops keep citing for the other thing. Jung had a whole toolkit designed adjacent to this. He practiced what we called active imagination, where you deliberately engage in images in your unconscious produces and let them develop, which he did obsessively in that big red leather journal that got published as a red book. A tarot spread is basically active imagination with a randomizer and a fixed vocabulary. He also had his famous idea of synchronicity, meaningful coincidence, which he laid out delightfully in the foreword to I Ching. And in that foreword, actually consults the I Ching about whether he should write the foreword, and reports the answer in the text. The man understood recursion. And coming back to being honest here, although Jung was interested in tarot, there's no evidence he used it clinically the way tarot books imply. His serious commitments were the I Ching and the alchemy, and don't let me overclaim him, but in 1933 line, the conditions of the present moment, that one's real, that one's sourced, and that one's ours now. Okay, so how does a card that means nothing tell you something? The mechanism has a name, a birthday, and a respectable pedigree with a lab coat on. In 1921, a Swiss psychiatrist named Hermann Rorschach published a set of 10 ink blots, literally symmetric blocks of ink, 5 in black and gray, 5 with color, along with a method. Show them to a patient, ask them what they see, study the answer. He died the next year at 37 before the thing actually became famous, which is in its own quite tragedy. But the idea outlived him, and in 1939, a psychologist named Lawrence Frank gave the idea its name and logic, the projective hypothesis. It goes like this. Hand someone a stimulus that has no inherent meaning, and whatever meaning they report must have come from them. The ambiguity isn't the flaw in the instrument. The ambiguity is the instrument. You're not measuring the ink blot. You're measuring what a mind does when handed absence. By 1935, Harvard had the thematic appreciation test. Ambiguous scenes in the patient tells a story about what led there, what happens next, how it ends, which sounds familiar because that is practically what a tarot spread asks of you. Rorschach asks, what do you see? The tat asks, what is the story? The tarot asks both, about your own life, but with better art. I want you to know this year, as clinical tests, as instruments for scoring other people and predicting things about them, projective techniques have taken a beating. The definitive skeptical review came in 2000. Most Rorschach and TAT scoring indices don't hold up. The classic scoring norms that made normal adults look pathological, only a minority of measures survived later meta-analytic scrubbing. If a consultant tries to hire your engineers using inkblots, run. But notice, and this is the move the whole episode turns on, every one of those criticisms about using ambiguity as a measurement of someone else. A test with a score making predictive claims administered across a desk. None of it touches what we're talking about doing tonight, which is using ambiguous prompt on yourself as an elicitation tool. A prompt doesn't have validity coefficients because a prompt isn't claiming to predict anything. Nobody demands test-retest reliability from a journaling exercise, from a rubber duck debugging, from a whiteboard. And for what it's worth, there is a small academic literature on exactly the use of tarot. A peer-reviewed paper from 2006 analyzing tarot explicitly as projective technique in the Rorschach lineage, consulting theses as recent as 2024, proposing it as a secular reflective tool in therapy. It's thin, it's theoretical, it's case study stuff, but there are real empirical trials don't exist right now, and I'm telling you that out loud because this show does not launder weak evidence. But the theoretical framing is sound, and the mechanism doesn't depend on tarot being special. It depends on ambiguity plus a human doing the projecting. At this point, custody of the argument passes to the enemy for a while, because everything I've just described has a rap sheet. The skeptics have spent 70 years cataloging the way this exact mechanism gets us used to scam people, and they're right. and we're going to teach you their entire case gleefully because a delicious thing happens when you point the debunker's arsenal at a self-reading. Every single weapon turns into a feature. Exhibit 1. The Forer Effect. In 1948, a psychology professor named Bertram Forer gave 39 students a personality test. Took a week, handed each of the students their own personalized psychological profile. He asked them to rate its accuracy, 0 to 5. The class average, 4.26. That was really, really good. Every student had received the identical text. Forer had assembled it by cutting sentences out of a newsstand astrology book. And you should hear the actual lines because you will feel them work on you right now in real time. You have a great need for other people to like and admire you. You have a tendency to be critical of yourself. You have a great deal of unused capacity which you have not turned into your advantage. At times, you have serious doubts as to whether you have made the right decision or done the right thing. Felt that? That little click of recognition? Like it knows you? Congratulations, you're a human being. Psychologist Paul Mill later named this the Barnum effect, after P.T. Barnum's A Little Something for Everybody. And the follow-up research found exactly what you expect. People accept vague statements most readily when they're flattering, and when they believe the process was personalized. That's the engine of every horoscope, every psychic hotline, every wow, this is so me, personality quiz that your cousin shares. Devastating, right? The whole thing runs on you supplying the specific. Now, flip that. If you're reading cards for yourself with no reader across the table, who exactly is being conned? The vague image lands, your mind rushes in with specifics from your own life, and the specifics, those were the payload. When a fortune teller does it, the crime is that they charge you for meaning you generated yourself. Remove the fortune teller, and what's left is a machine for generating exactly the material you were trying to reach. Forer's sketch is only a fraud when someone else takes the credit, or the fee. Exhibit number 2. Apophenia. Coined in 1958 by the German psychiatrist Klaus Conrad, studying the onset of psychosis, and his definition of it is so good it's almost poetry. The unmotivated seeing of connections accompanied by a specific feeling of abnormal meaningfulness. The face on Mars. Jesus on toast. The gambler who sees a pattern in the roulette wheel. Our pattern detector is turned hot. The evolution did that on purpose because the false positive, flinching at a rustle that wasn't a predator, cost a heartbeat, while the false negative costs everything. You're descendant from 100,000 generations of ancestors who saw meaning that wasn't there and lived. Overdetection is the factory setting. Nostradamus staring at a sugar. Unmotivated, seeing of connections accompanied by feeling of abnormal meaningfulness is clinical description of the ant. And flipped, the tarot spread is a controlled apophenia rig. You're deliberately laying out structured noise and inviting your overtuned pattern matcher to do the thing it was going to do anyway at 3 a.m. Except now it's doing it on your schedule, on your question, where you can watch it work and take notes. The patterns you find were never in the cards. They're standing waves in your own head, finally giving you a surface to break against. And Exhibit 3, our cold reading. And this one comes with the best origin story in skepticism. Ray Hyman, who became one of the great debunkers of psychic claim, started out as a teenage palm reader for money. He didn't believe a word of it until his readings kept landing and clients kept coming back moved. And young Ray started thinking, oh, maybe palmistry is real. What snapped him out of it, on advice, he tried telling clients the opposite of what the line said. The readings landed just as hard. The palms were doing nothing. Something else was doing everything. Decades later, he wrote the definitive paper on what that something is. Cold reading is a stage technique. Project confidence, use props and ritual to make it feel personalized. Remember, that's exactly the lever that Barnum research found. Open with vague statements, watch the client's face, fish, and let them connect your static to their lives. Hyman's central insight, the one that powers the entire psychic industry, is this. The client does the interpreting and gives the reader credit. Listen to that again, slowly, because that's the entire business case. The client does the interpreting. The interpretive engine on the customer side of the table, all along. Every storefront psychic is running a business on the fact that you are extremely good at this. They provide a deck, some mood lighting, a confident voice. You provide 100% of the insight, and they keep the $40 and the reputation. I'm proposing you fire the middleman. Same table, same deck, same engine, minus the $40, minus the stranger, minus the pretense that magic is anywhere but in your own skull. One genuine warning before we proceed, though. Confirmation bias doesn't flip. Watson in 1960. We test hypothesis looking for confirmation. We remember hits and forget misses. And that stays true when you read for yourself. You remember the spread that nailed it and forget the 13 that were mush. The mitigation is beautifully boring. Write it down. Question, cards, interpretation, date. before you know the outcome. Yes, leaders, a decision journal with better artwork. You're always going to end up keeping a decision journal. I've just made it goth. All right, here we are. Doors are locked. You've put the salt down around you. You've been so patient. The grimoire is open. The method itself, the run I wrote up in LinkedIn post a while back, refined. There's 4 steps to this, not too hard. Context first. This is for a specific class of problems, not what should our test coverage be? That has an answer, go compute it. This is for decisions where you've done the analysis and it tied. 2 strong candidates, 2 viable architectures, the job offer matrix where every weighted column sums to the same damn number. Pros and cons. Lists have a failure mode nobody talks about. Sometimes they end in a draw. And the draw is where the real suffering lives, because you've exhausted the analysis. And the nagging feeling in your gut still won't resolve into words. That nagging feeling is Lieutenant's too quiet. It's the March 11th nausea. It's the data with no keyboard. So let's give it one. Step 1. You need to gather your divination tools. A real tarot deck if you're feeling brave. Full witch mode, I respect it. And if you're buying one, buy the Rider Waite Smith. And now you know whose name matters in that hyphen chain. But and nothing scandalizes the mystics and skeptics more evenly, which is how I know it's true. Any deck of evocative images work. Your kids' Pokemon cards, Cards Against Humanity, Magic the Gathering, that stack of business cards from your last conference, a random image generator. I've personally done this. I've documented it publicly with cards from a game called Kittens in a Blender. And I want the record to show it worked fine. The mechanism doesn't care. Because, say it with me, the meaning is never in the cards. Step 2. Now you got everything all together. Hold the question. Sit with the actual decision. Phrase as concretely as you can make it. Think, talking to a magical genie. You want to be as specific as possible. Not, what does the universe want from me? You'll get mush. Something with stakes and a fork in it. Should I take the Google offer or should I stay? Do we re-rate the billing service or keep patching? Hold it while you shuffle. This isn't about charging the cards with your aura. It's about loading the question into your working memory so your pattern matcher knows what it's matching against. It's priming. You can use candles or not, it doesn't matter. Step 3, draw and say what you see. Pick a card, one card, look at it. And then this is the entire step. Say what you feel it means. Out loud, in the notebook, type it down. The first thing that comes up. Not the guidebook meaning. Don't go out and be like, what does this card mean? Not what the tarot website means. There are no wrong answers because you're not reading the cards, you're reading yourself of what the card's saying. If the Tower card makes you think of staging environment, well, that's the reading. If the Empress reminds you of your current manager, the one who actually protected the team, that's the reading. The card's an ink blot with better production values. And step 4, last part of this, interpret and repeat. Draw another. Is it a duplicate? Toss it. Draw it again. The goal is fresh imagery, not repeated hands. Say what you feel. Write it down. And keep going because what happens next is reliable, and it raises the hair on my arms every single time. A story starts to assemble. Card 3 connects to card 1. A theme shows up twice from different angles. And somewhere around the 4th or 5th card, you notice your gut has stopped mumbling and started pulling towards one option, away from the other. And the readings start converging. Every draw somehow telling the same story. That convergence is your tell. That's the subverbal analysis finally getting enough symbols on the table to say what it's been trying to say for weeks. Congratulations! You're actively tuned into your intuition. Dark power is unlocked. That'll be $99.95. Let me make it concrete and a real one. I published this spread, so I'll retell it. A while back, I was sitting on multiple offers, Amazon and Google among them, and every spreadsheet ended in a tie. So I did anything a rational person would do. I pulled out my tarot deck. First relevant draw, the Hangman, a figure suspended upside down. And what surfaced instantly wasn't the guidebook meeting, it was my friend at Amazon telling me about the crushing overtime, how trapped she felt, like her world was hanging upside down. Interesting. Next, the Five of Cups. Pixie's grieving figure with the spilled cups. And what came up was a Bonenkai, a year-end party I'd been with the Google Japan folks years earlier, and the specific ache of not being chosen by them back then. A loss I apparently still carried attached to an offer I now had in my hand, and I didn't want to lose twice. Then, death reversed, and I kid you not, my brain served up was Chrome crashing under my 40 open tabs. An old vow that someday I get to fix the thing from the inside, which was the Google offer on the Chrome team would let me do. Read the pattern back. Dread and entrapment, clustering around one option. Old longing and unfinished business pulling me towards the other. My gut had voted weeks earlier. The cards didn't tell me a single thing. They subpoenaed testimony in my own head sitting on, one image at a time, until the verdict was undeniable. And the beauty is, that spread in front of you, would produce completely different testimony. The hangman doesn't mean Amazon. It meant Amazon to me that day holding those offers. Your reading is yours. It's not transferable. It's not fungible. Not automatable. Pin that last word, and we're going to need it in a minute. Postscript, both of those offers were pulled amid a growing crisis in the tech industry, but they had not known it'd probably be somewhere on the West Coast by now. Well, Tarot's just one interface, by the way. The occult ships several clients for the same backend, and a few are worth knowing. The I Ching. And engineers, this one's for you because it's the most rigorously engineered divination system ever built. 3,000 years old, give or take, 64 hexagrams, 6 stacked lines, each broken or solid. Yes, it's a 6-bit binary encoding, 2 to the 6, 64 states, from the 9th century BCE. You generate a hexagram by tossing 3 coins 6 times, traditionally via an elaborate sorting ritual with sticks. But the slowness is a feature. The sorting time is a contemplation time. The stroke of genius, though, is a mechanic called changing lines. Certain tosses produce them. A yin flips to yang, old yang flips to yin, so one consultation hands you 2 hexagrams, the situation as it stands, and the situation as it's becoming, with specific lines under tension flagged. It's a state diagram with the delta highlighted differently. Someone built that in the Bronze Age, and I have a colleague who can't write a changelog. Bibliomancy. Go grab a random book off the shelf. Open a book at random. The first passage your eyes lands on is your answer. The Romans did it with Virgil. Medieval monks did it with the Bible, despite the church repeatedly telling them not to. As a mechanism, it's the purest possible demonstration of tonight's thesis. The text is completely arbitrary, relative to your question. So every scrap of relevance you perceive, by construction, 100% yours. The software version? Pull a random page from your old design doc and read it against today's problem. I'm serious. Your past self is a surprisingly effective oracle, and unlike the I Ching, it knew about your database. Runes. You got the Elder Forthak. 24 characters with terse, concrete meanings. Cattle, thorn, ice, harvest. The ancient rune divination system in your local bookstore is most likely a 20th century reconstruction. The popular version dates to a 1982 paperback, and the blank rune it ships with has no historical basis whatsoever. It's the occult equivalent of a vendor inventing a config flag and telling you it's POSIX. And yet, the inventedness doesn't matter. 24 blunt physical symbols make an excellent projected vocabulary. The fake parts of these systems keep working, which keeps telling you that where the working part lives. Tea leaves, tessography, drink the cup, read the residue. There's no symbol system at all. It's wet plant matter making random shapes. It's pareidolia served hot, which makes it all reducto of the whole field. If the tea leaves work, and for this purpose they work fine, the mechanism can't possibly be in the leaves. It never was in the cards either. And scrying, the crystal ball, the black mirror, the still bowl of water. Stare into a featureless reflective field long enough, and your visual system, stars of input, gain field effect, starts generating its old content. The most famous practitioner being John Dee, court astrologer to Elizabeth I, owner of the largest library in England, the man who literally coined the phrase British Empire, whose black obsidian scrying mirror sits in the British Museum today. And that mirror is Aztec, by the way, carved obsidian, sacred to the Tezcatlipoca, whose name translates into smoky mirror. Sorry, pronunciation terrible there. The Aztec god of divination carried to Europe in the wake of conquest by routes nobody ever traced. The smartest man in England gazed into the captured god's mirror of a murdered empire, taking dictation from whatever he saw there. Keep Dee in your pocket. I'm coming back to him at the end, because what he did it wrong is about to become extremely relevant to your stack. Okay, you knew this was coming. It's 2026, and there are AI tarot apps. Of course, there are AI tarot apps. Search your app store today. They're legion, with marketing copy like Ancient Tarot Wisdom meets Cutting Edge AI. A phrase that manages to be wrong twice in 9 words. The wisdom is not ancient. It's a pastor's 15-minute hallucination from 1781, and the AI part is worse than wrong. It's a category error, and I can prove that now because somebody finally ran the study. In April 2026, this is published in ACM, written by the authors themselves a month later, researchers interviews 12 tarot practitioners, novice to veterans, about using AI chatbots in their own readings, and the findings are a gift here. First, what people use the AI for, in the researchers' words, was to sidestep the frustration of interpreting many cards in light of the question. Read that carefully. They use the machine to skip the interpretation. The only load-bearing component in this entire ritual. That's not automating the commute. That's paying someone to eat your dinner. Second, and this phrase is going on my tombstone, participants reported that for difficult readings, the AI's yes man energy made them feel more confident about their interpretation. Yes man energy. It's sycophancy, field observed and named by tarot readers more crisply than AI papers manage. The one thing you structurally cannot get from a large language model tuned on human approval is the one thing a hard reading exists to deliver: resistance, the uncomfortable read, the card that says the problem is you. The study's example is so perfect for this audience, I refuse to improve it. Someone asks about a job change and draws the Fool, the leap into the unknown, alongside the Ten of Wands, burnout, carrying an unstable load. So does that spread say you're exhausted, leap somewhere better, or waits? Or does it say you're about to leap into a job that will burn you out in exactly the same way? Both readings are fully supported by the cards. The cards cannot disambiguate. Nothing in the 78 card vocabulary can. The only disambiguating information in the universe is in your own private knowledge of your own life, which meeting drains you. What did you do last time? What your body does on Sunday nights. Rather than sit in ambiguity and do the work, people asked the chatbot, which answered confidently from the position of knowing absolutely none of those things. A practitioner named Mae Jones Wall wrote the sharpest line in the whole discourse. The problem is that the tarot readings are the process. The reading isn't the paragraph at the end. The reading is the sitting with it. Automate the process and receive the product. You're holding a fortune cookie with better typing. And it goes deeper than the workflow, into the meat itself. Remember the Iowa decks? The sweat arriving, the 10 draws before the sentence? There's a 2026 paper in an AI ethics journal with the title I adore. A large language model has no body. A model can learn the word dread, every usage, every collocation, every Kierkegaard and dread and Yelp reviews. What it cannot do is have dread. It has no palms, no vagus nerve, no system that awakes at dawn before an earthquake because the floor has been whispering for a week. And if part of your evaluation engine literally runs on skin conductance and gut tension, and science says some of it does, then the model isn't a cheaper version of your intuition. It's missing the organ of your intuition runs on. This is not AI is dumb. The thing writes better SQL than me, and we both know it. It's that interpretation of your spread is not a language task. It's a having been you task. There is exactly one qualified vendor, and you're it. Try to clean a little exercise with me. Inventory everything that AI can do in tarot reading. It can shuffle, sure. Random shuffles your hands. Recall the traditional card meanings instantly, more completely than any human reader alive. It can generate the card images beautifully, ironically. You can write it in whatever style that you want. Uncredited at least keeps the tradition alive, especially if it's stealing art from other users. Every one of those automatable, and every one of those is part that was never doing the work. The machine can do everything except the person reading is about. And that job was the entire job. To be fair, the study did find one generally good use, and it's the exception that proves everything. Some practitioners used AI to generate alternative interpretations to argue against. Not an oracle, a sparring partner. Give me the reading I don't want to hear. That works because it hands you resistance and keeps you deciding in the you loop. Adversary, yes. Oracle, never. Write that on the whiteboard next to your sprint goals tomorrow. And now widen the lens, leaders, because this was never about tarot. Look at the practices you already respect. Gary Klein, the fire lieutenant guy, invented the pre-mortem. It's a year from now and the project failed. Write the post-mortem. That's a structured prompt for surfacing intuitions that can't get airtime in the planning meeting. A tarot spread in business casual. The retro. The decision journal. Rubber duck debugging, for heaven's sake. A literal projective ritual in which the duck contributes nothing and works anyway. All of them are ambiguity engines for making your own pattern recognition audible. And every one of them is currently being fed to chatbots by people who want the deliverable without sitting with it. Hand your pre-mortem to a model with a yes-man energy, and you will receive a confident, fluent, well-formatted, 200-page document containing zero of the thing the exercise is existed to extract. The knowledge that only lives in your meat. In a world where every artifact you produce can be generated in 8 seconds, the stuff that can't be generated doesn't get less valuable. It becomes the only thing that's valuable. Now the laminate leader. 4 rules for Ever-powered decision-making. Print them on card size and keep them behind your badge. Number 1. Use it only where intuition has standing. Kahneman inclines 2 conditions: learnable domain and years of feedback. Your gut has earned opinions about code rot, team fracture, the smell of doomed integrations. You've run those loops for decades with honest feedback. It has not earned opinions about the stock market or which candidate just feels right. Hiring by vibes is the drunk, not the genius. And in literature, on that is savage. Reading yourself in low validity domain doesn't summon wisdom. It summons confident noise in a robe, which fireground you're standing on. 2. Interrogate the gut. Don't obey it. The reading's output is testimony, not a verdict. When the spread coverage is on, you already dread this migration. That is a finding. Now go check it against the actual data, like you would a report from any smart analyst with no access to documentation. My March 11th mistake, remember, wasn't mysticism defiancy. It was refusing to even take the meeting. 3. Write down before the outcome. Questions, cards, read date. Confirmation bias is the only demon in this episode that doesn't flip friendly when you read solo. And the only banishing ritual that works is a written record you can score later. It's a decision journal. It was always a decision journal. Mine has a skeleton on card 13. 4. Never outsource the interpretation. Not the guidebook, not to the psychic at the fair, and especially not to the eager robot with yes man energy. Machines can shuffle. They can do all the heavy lifting for you. They can argue with them. Adversary mode is generally useful. But the moment something else tells you what your spread means, the instrument is pointed at nothing and the reading is of no use to no one. Which brings me back, as promised, to Dr. John Dee. Because here's the detail I withheld. Dee, the smartest man in England, the Queen's own philosopher, owner of the Black Aztec mirror, didn't scry himself. He couldn't see anything in the glass, so he hired it out to a man named Edward Kelly, a convicted forger, incidentally, missing both ears as punishment, which in retrospect was foreshadowing, sat at the mirror and gazed and reported. For 10 years, Dee sat beside him with Quill, faithfully transcribing someone else's vision. Whole angelic languages, volumes of celestial conversations, a decade of the finest mind in the kingdom, dutifully logging another man's hallucinations. And the punchline. The one that should follow you to Stanford tomorrow. Dee believed the mirror voices were angels. Kelly, the man actually doing the seeing, believed that they were demons, and begged repeatedly to stop. The Enterprise was finally collapsed when the angels suggested the two men should share their wives. But even then, Dee wrote it down, thought it was a good idea. The smartest man in England outsourced his interface to the deep and never once controlled or even knew what was actually on the other end of the glass. Anyway, that's my last word on delegating a reflective inner life to a confident third-party intelligence you didn't build and can't audit. Some episodes, I have to construct a metaphor. This one, it's been sitting in the British Museum for 400 years. So, here's your homework, and I'm entirely serious about it. The next time a real decision ties, genuinely ties, the spreadsheet's exhausted, the matrix is dead lost, both options defensible, and your stomach is still churning, don't flip a coin. Go find a deck, any deck, or grab a magazine. Tarot if you're brave, Pokemon if that's within the house, kittens in the blender if you want, walk my exact path, sit somewhere quiet, hold the question, draw, say what you see, write it down, draw again until the story shows up. And it will show up. Somewhere around the 4th or 5th card when the images start agreeing with each other, when you feel the pull start, you're going to have this strange little moment. A moment of, because you realize the answer was finished a long time ago, weeks ago maybe. Compiled, tested, and shipped to some deep internal address by a system that's been watching everything you've watched for your entire life. That counts the tremors you've learned to ignore. That sweats over bad decks before you can name them. That once, maybe, tried to keep you home in a morning the whole world broke. And that has been waiting patiently at the door of your attention, holding its report with no way in. The cards? They don't know anything. The cards have never known anything. There's 78 pieces of laminated cardboard drawn by a synesthete the world forgot to pay. But something in you knows. It's been knowing all along, in the dark, in the meat, below the words. The whole apparatus, the trumps, the hexagram, the leaves, the black mirror, every occult instrument humans have ever huddled over is just a different shape of the same door. And the knocking was always coming from inside. Nostradamus danced in the eclipse, reading the omens in sugar, and its colony called him mad. The difference between him and you, dear listener, is documentation. This has been Transmissions from Elysium. If this episode made you buy a tarot deck, tell them I sent you. If it made you cancel an AI tarot subscription, even better. And I'll count it towards your first month of the $99.95 Patreon, which, one final reminder, contains nothing because it doesn't actually exist. Go ask the meat. It's been waiting.